Hey, my name's Erica, and today we're going to talk about inclusivity and diversity at Sweetbriar as of 2024. I was a student between 2020 and 2022. I was the first trans female student. I was born identified as male, transitioned, and now identified as female. And I had the privilege of attending Sweetbriar as well as playing sports there. I played NCAA field hockey, NCAA lacrosse, which was wonderful. And I really only have fond memories of this school. Let me explain. When I sit here and think of Sweetbriar, I think of belonging, community, inclusivity, genuineness, and a chance to be who you want to be. And this isn't like that argument of you want to be an Apache helicopter, so you identify as that. No. The school was founded on these principles and ideas that a person should not be restricted to the access of higher education and training based on something of their innate demographic identity, meaning your race, your disability, your perception. Because in 1890, when Indiana Fletcher was drafting her will, she's our founder, an incredible woman, she decided that she wanted to leave her fortune, which was a plantation in Virginia in 1800s that had slaves, and did participate in the Civil War. She decided to leave her plantation to a organization that would create a school and a place of learning for, the quote often used is, white women. Now, this requires explanation because on the surface, you'd say, okay, white women. Well, one, obviously she means white women. She doesn't want black women. And, well, 1800s Virginia, so she must not want slaves or people of color to attend her school. That's not true. And then you say, well, women. Okay, well, she must obviously want what they understood as a woman to be back then. Here's the problem. I'm somewhat of a scholar. Self-proclaimed, I've had people that have tried and made fun of the idea that, well, you have a resume of self-promotion. Well, that's what a resume is. But I know how to read. I know how to research. And in 1890, the women's suffrage movement was occurring. Remember, women couldn't vote. And the idea of women going to college was still new. Women could attend college. However, in a medical journal in the 1900s, the New England Medical Journal, you can Google it, look it up, go for it. You'll find many references that women were considered too weak and febrile. Febrile meaning physically incapable of handling the stressors of higher education. Well, what did they base this off of? Well, they based it off of the fact that when they saw women go to colleges, after they started allowing them, very often they would drop out. They would drop out and leave and go back home. They would get homesick, they would get sick, and all this stuff. So the medical community in their time, believing they were doing good, realized and decided and did some research that, well, it makes sense. The average woman's brain is X number smaller, and they can't handle it. So maybe higher education isn't healthy for them. It was also a medical practice at the time that the best way for a woman to overcome mental health stresses was to allow them to experience menstruation. And if they did not have menstruation, to have sexual activity to encourage menstruation. Again, please feel free to look up the New England Medical Journal around the 1900s. They are published, and they are able to be read by anybody for free. And these are things that were argued. You know what else was argued? That the average person of color was incapable of being educated or being considered human. And they also advocated for eugenics. Again, I'm not sitting here and trashing these people around this time, because they did the best they could with the information they had. However, let's go back to Sweet Briar as an all-women's college. Indiana Fletcher left her fortune and plantation on her death to create a women's college, a place for white women to be educated. Now, in Virginia, around this time, it was required by law that if you were to create or have a college or school, it had to designate if it was for white or black people, because Virginia was not segregated. So, if there was a school, it had to state by law if it was for black or white people. So Virginia Fletcher had to state white or black students. Now, add on to that, many people argue Virginia Fletcher was an Episcopal, so she was a Christian woman, and so she would have been God-fearing. And let's not get into the debate that homosexuality was not introduced to the King James version of the Bible until the 1940s, based on a mistranslation. If you'd like a resource, Google it. Like, I'm not going to sit here and give you resources that you can find on your own. You're an intelligent person. But while she was an Episcopal, women at the time, in the 1800s, early 1800s, their purpose was to stay in the home, and then it was to be in the community and educate, but only under the guise of the church. So you had to affiliate with the church. Most of the places that were teaching were churches. Churches had money. They had a source in the community. Imagine if you wanted to teach and to educate and to help people. Well, I'm going to go to the church. Like, even nowadays, think of your mind. If you want to go help somebody, and you're like, I don't know the first step of going out, and I'm like, I want to go help somebody, and I'm not sure where. Who would know how I could access people that need help? Odds are you may consider a local church. It's not because you're religious. It's not because you believe that the church is good or bad. It's because that's where people go, because they are centers of community. Because that's what they design themselves to be. They're congregations. The term congregation means we surround, we come to. We're human beings. We are pack animals. We love being in a group, in a community. What does any of this have to do with Indiana Fletcher? Well, the argument of, she wanted it for a woman, and a woman that they understood at their time. They also didn't understand. Hear me out. It's crazy, I know. They didn't necessarily understand the idea of bacteriology. Penicillin was not invented yet. And they, again, believed that women were medically and physically not capable of handling college. So when Briar College was founded, there was a doctor on staff full-time to cater to the women that were attending it. They actually required the women on campus to have exercise for 30 minutes a day outside because it believed that that was a key to allow them to continue finishing school. So you ask, well, why would a woman not be successful in another school? I mean, another school, they started allowing women. Why wouldn't they be successful? Put your mind in a 17-year-old female in 1800s South. You go to a college, you're like, I'm going to come here, I'm going to learn. I don't know what I'm going to learn, but I'm going to learn, and I want to do my best. Well, guess who your fellow students are? A bunch of other guys that their dads have probably gone there, other guys have been there, and now all of a sudden we have to allow these girls in. I was a part of the United States Army when they allowed women into combat arms. I'm telling you, the perception of women coming into a male space is a real thing. The amount of people that were like, well, women can't handle combat. Men will not be able to focus on their job because they're thinking of women. Like every excuse under the sun. If you think that that's unique to nowadays, no. It existed back then. So, you're a woman going back to college and you're like, I just want to do well in my lecture. And let's say your professor was accepting or open-minded and didn't believe in biases, which at the time, we have so much documented evidence of people that purposely failed students they believed were not capable, including people of color and women, particularly in medical school. There are several famous cases, and they cited these eugenic reasons. Well, you're a woman at college, and some of your professors may be like that, and your fellow students, what's on their mind? Not sex. Not, oh, I want to be their friends or support them. It's, well, I'm turning 18. I could use a wife. They're in my class. Okay, cool. And so now you're a student, you're a female student trying to study, and you're getting hammered by guy after guy being like, hey, I'd love to court you. Hey, would you like to go out on a date? Would you like to get married? Etc. There's so much pressure. Of course that you're not going to do well. You're stressed, you're anxious, you're overwhelmed, and you're like, what? I should be okay with this, but I also want to study chemistry. So women's colleges came around because it was free of the distraction of people courting you. It was free of the distraction of people thinking that you were not good enough to attend their school. Fast forward 100 years. We're in another revolution, baby. Trans women, trans men, non-binary people, they're starting to gain prominence in the sense of people that have existed for years are starting to be recognized as actual people and not mental health illnesses. And if you want to argue that, remember, being a woman was actually a definition for mental health illness up until around 1912. Look up the origin of hysteria. In order to have hysteria, you had to have a uterus. Hysterectomy comes from that. So, that being said, Erica, what is the point of this conversation? The point of this is to talk about this decision by Briar College, their president, Mary Pope Hudson, and their board of directors. Now, Mary Pope Hudson has a past. We all do. I had a friend recently that pointed out, Erica, I looked at a video of yours from 13 years ago, and some of the comments you made was very spicy. And they were right. I said some shit a few years ago that wasn't good. But I educated myself. I changed. I challenged myself to get better. Mary Pope Hudson has surrounded herself with people that say you're doing good. There's nothing wrong with that. However, the problem is when you're not doing good, how do you know? If you're not willing to be challenged and address that challenge and admit that you may be wrong, maybe the problem isn't the topic at hand. Maybe the problem is a belief we might have. I am not in any way saying anything negative about the college, about the president, about the board of directors. I believe they made a decision based on their best intentions. What I am calling into question is their intentions. What are their intentions based off of? When we asked that, we were given the response, this was the intent of the will of Indiana Fletcher. When we did research into it, we found that Indiana Fletcher probably wouldn't think this. Why? Because in a time where women would be publicly punished for reading books, Indiana Fletcher died with 2,500 books in her library. Yes, she had religious texts, as many books around the time were published by religious communities. She also had Charles Darwin. She also had Descartes. She had many philosophers, many research papers, many books on art, on society. There's one book I remember, Is Tobacco the Enemy? It was on the idea that tobacco was addictive and was actually a substance that needs to be regulated in a time where, if you're a kid, you could smoke. So it's safe to say. Oh, also, in her will, Indiana Fletcher left $150 to many of her slaves when she died. Now, nowadays, that doesn't sound like a lot. And we're like, man, she had slaves post-World War II. Again, this was Virginia. This was before Civil Rights Movement. The fact of a wealthy white woman leaving her slaves $150, which is equivalent to around $5,000 nowadays, is a huge deal. Because that means that in your will, you're acknowledging that your slaves deserve money. Again, this is Virginia in the 1800s. This woman was progressive. This woman cared. We have letters from her father talking about how it is important for marginalized communities to have education. Well, guess what? In the 1890s, women were marginalized. People of color were marginalized, but Virginia didn't allow for a desegregated school, so she had to choose. Now, in 2024, who are some of the most marginalized people in this world? Trans people and non-binary. And what are the arguments keeping them marginalized? Biological arguments based on people that are not biologists or medical people. And fear-based arguments based on people that believe that the only thing a trans person wants is sex or to harass or sexually assault somebody. But these are based in concepts that are decades old and that shoehorn people like me into fetishes. In 2021, at Briar College, there was one case of sexual assault. I was a student on campus. I was not involved. The student that was involved came to my room and asked me and my roommate to help her. And we comforted her until the police and the ambulance arrived. That is who we're preventing coming on campus. My roommate and I was a trans woman. They were a non-binary person. We helped the one person on campus that was assaulted, and they felt comfortable coming to us. Sweet Briar is a home for people that don't have one. And there are people right now that are trying to stop that. People like Imogen Rex and several other alums. I hope you learned something today, and I hope at least you had some questions. Go Vixens.